Welcome back, Lorcana players. It's Poisonous. Today's video is a spooky new look at Whispers in the Well, the latest expansion coming soon to Disney Lorcana. This set brings lots of powerful and exciting new cards and a bit of a spooky horror twist to the game. In this video, we're going to break down 5 powerful new decks that I think are going to be ready to shape the meta and be lots of fun to play and test out. These decks are theory crafted, but I think that the strategies and the synergies that these decks use will be a force to be reckoned with in the upcoming set. As always, thanks for watching the video. Go ahead and exert the subscribe button and let's go on a quest together. Now let's dive into our first deck. So the first deck I want to take a look at is a new take on an old classic. Steel Song was one of the most dominant decks in the format for pretty much the entire time that Lorcana has been around, but with the fabled rotation, a lot of the important pieces that made it so good rotated out, but we're starting to get some interesting pieces back, so this deck, I think, has potential to be very strong and will only get stronger as things continue to develop. So let's look at the deck list. We have 3 copies of Elanwi. She's a princess. She's got support, and she's a 2/1. Rhino, so we have our shift line. We're running both Troubadour and Ursula. We want to have as many singers as we can for our songs. For 3 drops, we have Bagheera. He's a 4/4 that quests for 1, and we have Pete to shut down opposing actions. We're running the new Whisper Ariel, 4 copies of the new Champion Mickey Mouse, 4 copies of Rhino as a shift line, and just a very sticky, hard to get rid of character. 2 copies of Jasmine. She's just a really well-statted character, 3/7 that quests for 2 and has evasive on our turn, and you can boost her up to, take out even more challenging threats. 4 copies of Sonic Warrior. She is very powerful. She pairs well with all of our songs. She lets you get some additional board removal and lets you get control of the game. And 8 health is nothing to scoff at. For songs, we have 3 copies of World's Greatest Criminal Mind. You might want to adjust this up or down a little bit depending on the meta. If there's a lot of high strength characters, then I think it does really well. Also with Elanwi having support, we can support opposing characters and make them big enough to World's Greatest Criminal Mind. We also have 4 copies of Strength of Raging Fire, 4 copies of He Hurled His Thunderbolt, and then we have a couple different draw packages with Look at This Family, the 7-cost song that says look at the top 5 cards and put 2 characters in your hand. And then we have 4 copies of Beyond the Horizon, which lets you discard your hand and or your opposing player's hand to draw 3 cards. So it's a very disruptive card. It's also another way to get card draw. And because those are both synced together, our characters can sing it on their own potentially or in combination with the other characters on the board. So let's take a look at the new cards in this deck. First up is Elanwi. Like I said, she's a 2/1, 1-drop. She's a princess. She has support, which is pretty good. She can be versatile, kind of like Basil in the purple-blue deck. Bagheera is a 4/4, quest for 1. 4/4 is kind of the new standard for 3-drops. There are some in different colors, but this allows you to have a huge body that's very hard for opposing players to deal with. Great for challenging. We have 4 copies of the Ariel Ethereal Voice. She's a boost 1, 3/4 that quests for 2, but her ability says, once during your turn whenever you play a song, if there's a card under this character, you may draw a card. So you boost her once, and then every time that you play a song each following turn, so like once a turn, you can draw a card. So playing songs also becomes a bit of a draw engine, and she does provide a shift target for Sonic Warrior as well, but she seems like a very good card, and I think there's an argument I could see for playing Aurora as a 1-drop instead of Elanwi if you wanted to try and get this Ariel out on turn 3 potentially. I definitely see that also being like a valid strategy. And then we have our champion for Amber, the 4-cost Mickey Mouse. He's a 2/5, quest for 1, but he has 2 really good effects. Your other Amber characters gain +2 health, and when you have 2 or more Amber characters in play other than this Mickey, he becomes a Singer 8. So I've built this deck to have a lot of characters that are Amber. That's why some of the good Steel characters in like the 2-cost and 3-cost slots, I'm just not running them because I want to try and make sure that the Mickey becomes enabled pretty much every time. So you go like a Amber 1-drop, Amber 2-drop. Troubadour counts because he's dueling. and then you play like a 3-drop, preferably Bagheera, and have him online. But if you play Pete, at least if you did like a 1 and 2 drop in Amber, then the Mickey Mouse is enabled right away. Also, the +2 health is huge for making all the Amber characters way harder to remove. Ursula having 6 health, Troubadour having 5 health and resist 1, the Power Hamster having 5 health with the resist 2. So it's going to be a big problem for opposing characters. I think the Mickey Mouse is really good. For our song package or singing package for board control, we're running 4 copies of Ursula and Troubadour. We want to almost guarantee that we're going to have that 2-drop so we can play a character on 3 and do 3 damage with strength, or we want to be able to play the Thunderbolt and remove the opposing character and really get a huge tempo advantage. So I think that this package is going to be really oppressive and kind of annoying because they're going to be hard to remove, especially on the play. But even on the draw, I think Truby is really good. And I talked about this already, but the Mickey Mouse giving +2 health works really great with our resist characters, works really great with Bagheera, and really any Amber character is going to be pretty annoying to deal with if it's got +2 health. So those high health, high resist characters are going to be a big problem for your opponent. They're going to need ways to deal with the Amber Mickey, and I think that he's a really good card for enabling the rest of the deck. So that's the Amber Steel deck list. I think Amber Steel's back, so you better watch out. And if you're not a fan of Steel Song, you're going to have to deal with it because I think that you're going to start seeing it big time now. Next up, we have Blue Steel. So Blue Steel, I think, is a deck that started to really get big at the end of Fabled meta. We started to see it pop up at big tournaments, and I saw it make like day 2 at the DLC in Milwaukee. And the deck is based around the idea of ramping into big characters and disrupting your opponent a bit. So this deck does that very well, and I think we can be even more consistent and more powerful with some of the new cards that we got. So let's take a look. We got 4 copies of Jasmine. She's there as a shift line for the 4-cost Jasmine that lets you look for allies. 4 copies of Mulan, just to let you draw and discard, help you deal with uninkables and get the cards that you want in your hand. For our ramp package, we have 4 Tipo, 3 Pleakley, 4 Sail, and now we're running the new Cinderella, as well as for a 4-cost that does ramp as well. We have our Jasmine, Steady Strategist, 4 copies of the new Headless Horseman, Bodyguard, 4 copies of Jasmine. So if you haven't been counting, we have 20 princesses in this deck, which means that the chances of enabling Cinderella over and over again is really good. We have Tinkerbell Giant Fairy, 4 of, and then our big bruisers. We have Hades at 4, Vincenzo at 4, 3 Headless Horsemen, 1 Mufasa. We're only running 1 Mufasa just because he's powerful when the game is close, but when you're behind, he's not that good. So we want to have him as an option, but not a card that you want to build your full deck around. But with all the ramp options, he seems like a good choice. 2 copies of Spooky Sight, 4 copies of Strength Raging Fire, and 3 copies of Beyond the Horizon for disruption and card draw. So let's dive into the new cards and have a little bit of a closer look. So new from Whispers in the Well, we have the 4-drop Headless Horseman. You can play him on turn 3 if you've ramped. And he's a 4/4, he's a bodyguard, so you could use a bodyguard effect if it's convenient for you to do so. But he's mainly here as a shift target for the big Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman's ability says when you play this character, each player draws 3 cards and then discards 3 cards at random. So very disruptive because it can cause you to discard things maybe you don't want to, but more importantly, it could cause your opponent to discard things that they don't want to, disrupting their strategy. And then from the 6 cards that are discarded, 3 from each of you, choose an opposing character and deal 2 damage to them for each action card discarded this way. So potentially up to 12 damage being dealt there. We don't have that many actions, so it's unlikely to hit that many, but it is at least a nice way to maybe remove some small or medium-sized character. You hit a couple actions. We have the 4-cost Cinderella Dream Come True. There's a lot of hype around this card. She does seem pretty good. She's got a weak body as a 2/3/1 quester for 4, but she's an extra way to ramp. So you play her on 3, and it says at the end of your turn, if you played a princess character this turn, and she's a princess, so she self-triggers, you may put a card from your hand into your inkwell face down to draw a card. And this is important because it lets you ink potentially an uninkable card, lets you shape your hand, and then you get the value back by replacing her with a draw from the top of your deck, which, depending what you ink, is probably going to be better than the card that you ended up inking. And then we have the new and very powerful Spooky Sight. This card says put all characters with 3 cost or less into their player's inkwells face down and exerted. This means that you can wipe out a full aggro board with one action, but since it affects both players, you're essentially ramping both people, which is really good if you've built your deck around having lots of big, strong, powerful characters. We have, and our opponent may not have. So you can potentially take advantage there, but it is a bit of risk reward against other control decks. You are helping them out with ramp as well, and maybe their small characters are pretty inconsequential. So could be good, could be bad, but I would say overall extremely powerful card. And the last part of our synergy here is our big bruisers. So we want to ramp up to the big stuff that wins us the game, and we have that with 4 copies of Hades, Infernal Schemer letting us do single target removal. We have our Headless Horseman who provides disruption and potentially dealing damage and getting rid of opposing characters. We have Vincenzo Santorini. When you play him, you can deal 3 damage. He basically casts Smash on play, but he's a 3 questing body that has 8 health, so very sticky. And then the Mufasa as a 1-of, just to really take advantage of our ink, draw some cards out of our inkwell if we've ramped a lot. And, you know, if our opponent can't deal with him, he's going to win us the game. So really great card. And these are the bruisers that kind of carry this deck home. This is our winning strategy, is to get those guys out there on the board. Next up, we have green yellow. This is probably one of the most interesting and fun decks with the introduction of a new Wombo combo. But this deck uses some strategies that we've been thinking about and wanting to build with Circle of Life that seems now possible with some of the new tech that we're getting for Whispers in the Well. This deck runs 4 copies of Bobby as a 1-drop. He lets you draw and discard a card, which is important for enabling our big stuff strategy. Running 4 copies of Mowgli, he provides a similar to Bare Necessities like effect where the opponent reveals their hand and they have to discard a non-character card. So it could be an action, song, location, item. But the important difference here is that the opposing player gets to choose what's discarded. So not quite as good as Bare Necessities or as Ludwig or maybe even Ursula, but he's Amber and we want Amber characters to enable this deck. So he's in here. We got 4 copies of Ursula as a singer 4, 4 copies of Bagheera. Again, if you remember from our Amber Steel deck, he's just a really big body that pairs really well with Mickey Mouse. We have 4 copies of Clarabelle. She's in here as an option to give us a card draw and provide a shift line for Big Clarabelle. 4 copies of Prince Philip with Ward. 4 copies of Dale. 4 copies of Mickey Mouse, our Amber Champion. 4 copies of Stitch, Carefree Surfer. 2 for Tramp. 4 Big Clarabelle. 2 Chip and Dale. 4 Big Prince Philip. And then for songs, we have 4 copies of Malicious, Mean, and Scary, 4 Circle of Life, and 4 Under the Sea. So let's look closer at the new cards. So Mowgli, we kind of talked about a little bit. He's like Bare Necessities, but slightly different. But he's a good body and a good way to disrupt your opponent. If you're playing against like Purple Steel, chances are the only actions or non-characters that they're going to have are Fire the Cannons or Strength of Raging Fire. So as long as they only have 1 in hand, they're going to be forced to discard it anyway. So still a good card. Bagheera is a good 4/4 stat pile on turn 3. Gets even better with our Mickey Mouse Amber Champion, giving it +2 health. And he becomes a Singer 8 if we have the 4 characters out. So that's what we're really aiming for, is to try and enable that combo in our early game so he can sing Under the Sea or Circle of Life. And then the other card is Malicious, Mean, and Scary. It says put 1 damage counter on each opposing character. A really strong song, pings everything. Because it's putting damage counters, it gets around resist, so breaks up cards like Nala and the Rhino Power Hamster, but also importantly just has your opponent have all damage characters, which will be important later on. To enable this deck, we want to have Bobby on turn 1. Bobby will let you discard a card. So ideally here, you're going to discard something really powerful like Prince Philip or Surfer Stitch, something that you want to be able to pull back from the discard later with Circle of Life. We have the 4-cost Dale. When you play this character, you may put the top 3 cards of your deck into your discard and give an opposing character -3 strength. So the main draw there is that we're getting to discard stuff, so that way we can bring it back from the discard with Circle of Life. life, but also the -3 strength does pair well with Under the Sea potentially, or just makes challenging a little bit better. And the Dale provides a shift target for Chip and Dale, who could also sing these songs. We have Mickey Mouse, the Amber Champion. We've talked about him enough, but just really good. Having Singer 8 means that he can sing both Under the Sea or Circle of Life, so we really want to get that enabled and online. And then the last and probably the most well thought out part of the deck is the Wombo combo that you get with Prince Philip, Vanquisher of Foes. So Prince Philip's a 6/6 that quests for 3, he's evasive, but what he's really good at is when you play this character, he banishes all opposing damaged characters. So we can combine that with Malicious, Mean, and Scary, put 1 damage on each opposing character. Then when you play Prince Philip, you get a board wipe, even works against like warded characters. So very strong. So to enable this combo, we have the little Prince Philip. He's a 3/2 with ward, so opposing players aren't going to effectively have many ways to deal with him. So they might know you have the shift wombo, but there's nothing that we could do to stop it because he's got ward. So he's a really great shift target. Still need 6 ink to do the shift, but the cool thing is you can kind of self-enable this. If he's out and you have the 6 ink, he can sing Malicious, Mean, and Scary, doing the damage, and then you can shift onto the exerted Prince Philip to do the board wipe. We also have the option to do Circle of Life. So if you discard Prince Philip early, then you could potentially bring him out with Circle of Life and not have to pay the full, iron price to get him on the board. So really fun combo. This deck is a lot more scary now that it has a bona fide board wipe. And the Under the Sea was already there, but a new way to do a board wipe means that you're going to have to watch out for this deck. It could really combo off and, ruin your game plan. Next we have Purple Steel. So I'm calling this list Geniegoyles. This is kind of a fun list. I don't think that it's as serious as you could build Purple Steel, but there is a fun combo here that we'll look at how to exploit that I think makes the list fun. So let's dive into the list. We got our 1-drops of Captain Hook and Mulan, pretty standard. We have quite a few uninkable, so the Mulan is there just to really help in the early game if we're dealing with uninkable issues. We got 4 copies of Black Heron, 2 copies of Calhoun, 2 copies of Jafar. We got 4 copies of the Genie Dragon, 4 copies of Pete. We got Dumbo, Genie, Elsa, so the usual evasive gang. 2 copies of the new Hades as a bit of targeted removal or to draw some cards potentially. We got our Jasmine, who I really like. She's got a lot of good stats. 2 copies of Demona. You could probably run more copies of her. She's probably the best legendary from the new set, but in this strategy, I don't think that we don't need as many because we're running 3 copies of Goliath, 3 copies of a relatively unplayed Genie, and then we have 2 copies of Cannons, 2 magical maneuvers, 4 strength, and 4 He Hurled His Thunderbolt. So first, let's look at the new cards. For a 2-drop, we have the Black Heron, Real Bad Egg. She's just a 3/3 that quests for 1. Having cards like Smee and Calhoun show us that the 3 strength body is really good, and having just a 3/3 on 2 seems extremely strong, really good for trading, and just a threat for opposing characters to have to deal with. 4 copies of Herald as Thunderbolt. I think that this song is just really great for removal. Being able to deal 4 damage is really significant. Demona says when you play this character, exert all opposing characters, then each player with fewer than 3 cards in their hands draw until they have 3. So she lets you draw cards, and the other important thing she does is exert the characters, so we get some interaction. But she's also a 5/6 that quests for 2, so she's really well statted. She does have the downside of all the gargoyles, which is Stone by Day. If you have 3 or more cards in your hand, you can't ready this character. So you want to make sure that you're managing your hand appropriately after you've played her, and you need her to start readying each turn. And then we have the 6-cost Goliath, who also has Stone by Day, and his effect is a little bit similar but a little bit different as well. So he's a 6/5 that quests for 2, and it says at the end of each player's turn, if they have more than 2 cards in their hand, they choose and discard cards until they have 2. If they have fewer than 2 cards in their hand, they draw until they have 2. So he basically makes sure that your other gargoyle cards will always be up, because he prevents you from having that 3-card threshold, which is nice. And also if you're dumping your hand, he's just letting you draw 2 cards. So he's really good. We have our evasive package. We have Dumbo, who's evasive and gives your other evasives the ability to exert and pay 1 ink to draw a card. This pops really well with like our Jafar Royal Vizier, Genie Satisfied Dragon with Elsa, also with like the 4-cost Genie as well, but he quests for 2, so sometimes you want to quest him, sometimes you want the card. Really depends on the matchup and the situation that you're in. but having this Dumbo draw package is very good, and the Dumbo is always a bit of a removal target, so we have an alternate way to draw cards with our evasives here. And then the last synergy that I want to talk about is with Genie, Wonderful Trickster, and Goliath. So this is kind of the namesake of the deck. The Genie, Wonderful Trickster is a ship 5, 4/7, he costs 7, says whenever you play a card, draw a card, and then at the end of your turn, put all the cards in your hand on the bottom of your deck in any order. So basically he just lets you kind of chain cards so you can play as many cards as you can during your turn, which can be quite powerful. It's also a bit lucky because you're always just living one card to the next. But he's got a couple shift targets in the deck, so he fits well on curve with Genie Wish Fulfilled, but also can shift off Genie's Satisfied Dragon. But I think the real pairing here is that you can sequence your end of turn effects. So Goliath says at the end of each player's turn, they have more than 2 cards in their hand, they discard until they have 2, and if they have fewer than 2, and they draw until they have 2. So as long as you choose the right sequencing, you can make this work for you with the Wonderful Trickster. The Wonderful Trickster says at the end of your turn, you put all your cards on the bottom of your deck. So you do that first, and then you have 0 cards in hand, so then Goliath lets you draw 2. So at the start of your next turn, you have only 2 cards, but you draw, now you have 3, and every time you play one the following turn, you get to draw again. So you can ink and, play multiple cards potentially, or you have choices instead of always just living one card to the next. So sequencing those 2 end of turn things is kind of like how you used to sequence Mr. Smee and the Goofy Chef, where you do it in the right order and it really benefits you. So it's a fun combo, and I think that, you can potentially chain off some crazy stuff and really throw your opponent for a loop with this little combo. That's why I call the deck Geniegoyles. So the last deck that we're going to take a look at is Big Goyles. So this is a red-purple deck that uses really big characters to try and win the game. By big characters, I mean characters with high stats, a lot of strength, and also uses a bit of the damage matters stuff to control the early game. So let's look at the list. We got 4 copies of Palace Guard, 4 copies of Mulan, 4 copies of Lumiere to give everyone +1 strength. We're running the Queen of Hearts 2-drop because when she's damaged, she gains +3 strength, so she's a threat to opposing characters. We're running 3 copies of Madame Medusa. She's a 3/3 that lets you bounce opposing characters and deal damage to your own characters, which can be beneficial. We got Bronx as one of the new gargoyles, Prince John, Frady Cat, 4 copies of Genie, Wish Fulfilled, 4 copies of Goliath, 4 copies of Elsa, and 4 copies of Demona. So Demona is probably the best legendary from the new set, and I think that she's going to see a crazy amount of play, and in this deck we definitely want 4 copies. We're also running 4 copies of Maui Half Shark, 3 copies of Mulan Elite Archer, and 1 copy of the Big Hades, just as a bit of a draw package and also to deal damage to our characters. For actions, we have Next Stop Olympus, which is a new card that we'll take a look at. Same with Can't Hold It Back Anymore. And then we have 3 copies of A Pirate's Life to try and slow down our opponent. So let's take a closer look at the new cards that this deck is using. We have in the 3-cost slot Bronx, Ferocious Beast. He's a 6/4, which is incredibly strong for a 3-cost character. But he's got Reckless, which means that he has to challenge if able. He can't quest. And he's got the Stone by Day, so if we have 3 or more characters in hand, he can't ready. We've got Goliath. He's a 5/5 on turn 4. And his ability says, whenever one of your gargoyle characters challenges another character, gain 1 lore. Obviously, that synergizes really well with Bronx. And he's got Stone by Day as his downside for being overstated. We've got Elsa, Spirit of Winter. She's not a new card here, but she does work well with the kind of play line of turn 3 Bronx, turn 4 Goliath, and then turn 5 Elsa, where you force an opposing character to be exerted so that way your Bronx or Goliath can challenge. And when that happens, you're gaining a lore in the process. So very strong. And then we move up to our 6-cost of Demona, who lets you draw cards till you have 3, but she exerts all opposing characters, which means that our Bronx and Goliath get to challenge characters again and gain us lore. So the 3, 4, 5, 6 curve with these new cards seems really strong. For our early game damage matters, we have Palace Guard. He's a 1/4. He does have Vanish, which is a little unfortunate, but the 1/4 body means that he can hold damage, and that works really well with Medusa, Deceiving Partner. She's a 3/3, and her ability says when you play this character, you may deal 2 damage to another chosen character of yours to return chosen character with cost 2 or less to their player's hand. So basically, you want to go Palace Guard on 1, something else on 2, her on 3, do 2 damage to Palace Guard, and bounce your opposing player's 2-drop. 2-drop, especially if you're on the play. The 2-drop is their kind of biggest character at that point, so you're really getting a good tempo value there. But we also have Mulan, Injured Soldier, who comes in with 2 damage, meaning that she's already got damage for us to move around. We've got Prince John Frady Cat. He takes a damage every time the opposing player plays a character. And then we have the new song, Can't Hold It Back Anymore, where you exert chosen opposing character and move all damage counters from all other characters to that character. So we get some more interaction for our gargoyles there. Even if we don't have enough damage to take it out, we can then challenge with our gargoyle and, gain a lore potentially. But we can remove all the damage from our other characters and take something out that way as well. And it's a song, so you can sing it and not lose any tempo. So the damage matter stuff does seem really good there. And then the last combo, which is kind of fun, is with Maui Half Shark. So Maui is no stranger to being one of the best cards in the format. Hasn't got a lot of play because Ruby has been underpowered and fabled, but there's a bit of a new combo here with Next Stop Olympus. This 2-cost action says if you have a character with 5 or strength or more in play, you can pay 2 less for this action. So essentially it's free as long as you have a character with 5 strength. So the cool thing here is that if your opponent has a lot of exerted characters, including you can, chain this with Demona to force them to be exerted, but Maui can challenge. When he does that, you retrieve this action from your discard, play it to ready him. He challenges, you do the same thing. So you do this basically until Maui runs out of health. And you can pair that as well with the song that moves the damage, so you can take the damage counters off of him and then play Next Stop Olympus again and keep readying him and just kind of chain it. So you get kind of a wombo combo or potential board wipe. And every time you play the action, you're gaining a lore for the shark. So that's really good. And then of course we have Maui Half Shark and a Pirate's Life, which is a tale as old as time. You can't name a more iconic duo. Gaining 3 lore, taking 2 away from your opponent and slowing them down, or just, pushing us over the edge to win the game. So red purple, I think, has chops again. I'm sure that there's more ways you could build it with the damage matters or more ways to lean into the gargoyles, but I did kind of a split of early game damage matters and late game big stuff, and then we got the pirate board wipe. But at least the deck has some different versatile lines, and I think it's really good. So those are the decks that I'm really excited about for Fabled. There's definitely more that I can think of in other colors like red steel that I think have serious potential. So I'm going to be doing some more crafting, and I might look at some more serious decks like Blurple. I do have a Blurple list already on my Dreamborn, so if you follow me on there or, find my creator page, you can see the more serious lists that I have. Not that these lists aren't serious, but they are, using niche combos or strategies that, might not be the classic mid-range or classic control value, but I think that the potential for them to pop off is there, and I think that these are great platforms to build on. Theory crafting is tough because without playing and seeing what decks are being played and what works and doesn't, all I can do is imagine, and I've had a lot of fun imagining. I think that this set is going to greatly increase the amount of versatility and increase the power of the game overall. I think that's what people want. I know people still want B-Prep and other cards to come back, and so do I, but I think we're making progress in the right direction now. The interestingness of the game is going up for sure. So thanks for watching the video. Drop a comment. Let me know what decks you're excited about. Let me know what you think of my decks, or, tell me any combos I missed or things I could do to make them better. I'm always there in the comments. I'll respond. I love to interact with everyone who watches my videos. Thanks as always. Cheers.